Hey everyone, I'm Armor Gaming, welcome back to my channel and welcome to Monster Analysis. Up for analysis today is Fatid. Once upon a time there was a little shellac who lived in a swamp. One day, Dr. Hazard started using that swamp as his dumping site and contaminated it. After years of eating rotten garbage and being in contact with contamination, that little shellac turned into this pestilence beast, Fatid. And so for those of you that don't know, shellac is actually another Monster Legends monster, an uncommon one, so that's this monster right here. And so the fact that Fatid is essentially that same monster, just contaminated thanks to Dr. Hazard, I love that background story, I love the monster lore, love the history. With that said, here we have Fatid. He's actually going to be the newest Monster Legends Team Race monster. And by the way, I'm making this video before the release of this monster, so take everything in this video with a grain of salt. His stats, his skills, the amount of damage he does, the amount of stamina, the cooldown, there's a possibility that can still be changed. And with that little warning said, let's jump right into it. Fatid has a power of 3432, and currently in the nature category there's a total of 40 nature legendary monsters, and with a power like this, it puts him tied for 16th place with monsters like Silotus and Plymouth. As for his life, he has 45,239, making him officially the tankiest nature legendary monster, and actually, he's officially the tankiest monster in the whole entire game. 45,239 is an insane life. He has more life than Igursis. He took Igursis' crown. That's right, he has more life than Igursis, Barbell, Okiawa, all of these other tanks in the game. So Igursis has a life of 42,525. So Fatid beats him by 3,000 points, which is honestly just really something special. But unfortunately, his speed is 3,069. Now, a speed like this actually puts him in 38th place in the nature category. That's right, he's only faster than two other nature monsters, Virus and Lagercon. But in relation to some of the tankiest monsters in the game, it's not really that bad. You know, Igursis, for example, has 2926, so Fatid is faster than Igursis. Okiawa has 3157, Tankirion has 3091, Kryleton has 3003, Oros has 2772, Belor has 3278, and I'm not even mentioning Barbiel because he's a War Master, he has insane stats all around. But yeah, compared to the tankiest of tanks, Fatid's speed, it's really not something to complain about. It's not terribly bad, he's also not terribly fast. Compared to nature monsters, yes, he is super slow, but another thing to keep in mind is that he is a team race monster, meaning that a lot of players are going to be able to get him at rank 3, and actually with this new team race you can even get him at rank 4. So actually let me just showcase his stats at level 115, 3900 power, 59,752 life, and 3487 speed. Or actually if you're able to get this monster at level 120 or rank 4, 4056 power, 65,039 life, and 3627 speed. So obviously, depending on your team dynamic, depending on whether or not you can get this monster, honestly, you can even get him ranked 1 or rank 2. So you can get him up to rank 4, regardless of where you get him. It's going to depend on how usable this monster is and what runes you can put on this monster. But we'll talk about that more later on. Let's continue. Fatid also has the Mountain trait, which gives him immunity to both stun and freeze, which is honestly a pretty nice trait. As for books, he's going to be in Evil Legions and in the Underworld book. For relics, he can hold the Trap Relic and the Staff Relic. And honestly, on this monster, those are some pretty good relics. With the Trap Relic, he's going to be able to abuse taking away stamina from the enemy monsters. Or if you want, at the very start of the battle, when the battle just begins, you can decrease all the enemy's max life, which will make it easier for you to take them down. And as for the Staff Relic, well, you can take advantage by draining the enemy's stamina when they attack you, or you can take their stamina away when you attack them, or if all of your monsters are low on stamina, and of your teammates, you can heal their stamina. And so you have some nice different relics to play around with. Oh, and one new cool feature that MonsterWiki has added to the database of monsters, they've added a combat role, which pretty much tells players what the main purpose of this monster is, and according to the MonsterWiki, this monster is a tank, which I think is pretty evident from his life. 45,239 is a huge life, again giving this monster the crown of first place. He has the highest life in the whole entire game. But going back to the combat role of tank, I kind of disagree with it. Now there is no question in my mind that he is definitely tanky, but I don't know if I would really use this monster as a tank. When I think of a tank monster, I think of a monster that has the taunt skill. That way, single attacks are directed towards your monster, therefore protecting your other allies. Or I think of a monster that can give a 50% team shield, 100% team shield, you know, that increases survivability of everyone. I think of a monster that can give themselves life regeneration or have healing skills so they can really stay alive. But I think the most important thing is really having taunt, having some sort of way to actually tank attacks to protect your team. But maybe I'm just being a little picky. The reason I say that is because Fatid actually doesn't have any taunt skill, meaning he has no way of actually protecting your team. And if you have this monster at base 100, his speed is rather low. And typically a tank, you'd want to rune them with like a life rune, or maybe you want a rainbow build, 1 strength, 1 life, 1 speed rune, or maybe team speed. But honestly, with this monster, I'm just going to go ahead and tell you guys right off the bat, I think the best rune set for this monster is to give him 3 team speed. Have him go last, have him do whatever he needs to do. I don't think running him with a rainbow build is your best option. I don't think giving him a life rune is actually even good. He already has a high tanky life, and normally I say maximize, capitalize on their best stat, whether it be life, speed, or power. But I think Fatid himself, I think he's a great, phenomenal team speed holder, especially if you've been looking for a nature team speed holder, or an evil agents team speed holder, or an underworld team speed holder. I personally think it's really good to have a team speed holder in every single element in every single book. That way when you're doing your attacks, you have a monster that can give your main denier a competitive advantage. And then I'm also going to say this because there are some players that could probably utilize 3 speedruns on this monster. Once again, it just depends on whether or not you get this monster ranked up or not. Because if you happen to get this monster rank 4, with his rank 4 base speed of 3627, that's certainly going to be better than your level 100 monster that has a base speed of 3465 or 3498. So if you happen to get this monster ranked up, even though he has a slow base stat at level 100, because you have him ranked up, you could actually utilize him with 3 speedruns and run him as a main denier because he actually has a control skill. And of course we're going to talk more about that, so let's get right into the skills. His ultimate skill is Pestilence Curse, deals moderate nature damage to all enemies, applies poison to all enemies, applies delayed kill, so in 3 turns the enemy will die, to all enemies, heals itself by 50%. So AoE poison, which takes away 10% of the enemy's HP for the next 4 turns, not that it matters because you're going to die in 3 turns, you heal yourself by half, 50%, which is really significant given this monster's max HP, and again, delayed kill, the enemies will die in 3 turns. Honestly, overall, I'm not the biggest fan of this ultimate, I don't think it does too much. Delayed kill takes way too long to actually kill. If it happened to land against a monster like a Voltic or a Xyla, and then they utilize extra turn skills and they died, you know, they're obviously not going to be killing your Fatid, but all the extra turns will kill them, that's nice and all, but honestly, in most games, I think 3 turns is way too long. If you're not winning by 3 turns, you're probably not doing something right. But that being said, I can't knock the fact that it could potentially come in handy and it could end up winning you the game. In a worse scenario, it might end up winning you at least 1 coin, because in those 3 turns, it might be very, very difficult for the enemies to actually kill Fatid considering how tanky he is, and then just wait till you see his other skills. I would have really liked if Pestilence Curse also did something more like denied the enemy, whether it be a stun, a freeze, or possession. I think that could have made it immensely more powerful, because then the delayed kill would only need 2 more turns to take effect, or if not a control skill, I would have even liked if this also added something like Bleed. That way all of the enemy's damage output is further reduced, and on top of that, there is the potential that DLT will kill the enemy monsters, as opposed to just relying on delayed kill. Because with poison by itself, there's a strong chance that isn't going to be enough to kill the enemy monster with just the poison damage alone. But as for the healing, I do like that. If they wanted to take advantage of healing, I would have liked a self-taunt on this monster. So overall, not the biggest fan of the ultimate, but let's continue. So skills group 1 doesn't have too much to talk about, with the exception of Fart Machine, applies poison to all enemies. It deals no damage, it costs no stamina, and it has no cooldown, but it poisons all of the enemy monsters. The reason I like this skill as a standalone skill is the fact that it costs no stamina and it has no cooldown, and poison reduces the enemy's monsters' damage output by 20% and reduces their HP by 10% for the next 4 turns. It's not the most powerful skill, it's not the most glamorous skill, but it at least does something at no cost to you. Whether your cooldown is activated, whether your stamina is drained, you can at least do something to the enemy team. And so that's the only reason I'm mentioning Fart Machine. With that said, on to skills group 2 we go. Putrid Organism. Applies regeneration to itself, applies poison to all enemies, requires cooldown. This skill deals no damage, it costs 16 stamina and has a 2 turn cooldown. And so basically it's a self-regeneration that poisons all of the enemy monsters, and according to this, the poison is guaranteed to land. I'm wondering if it says 100% just because it's a self skill, but it's also not a self skill because it poisons all of the enemy monsters, but it does seem like it's 100% guaranteed poison, which is pretty cool. Next up we have Rotten Claw, deals massive nature damage to one enemy, applies poison, bleeding to one enemy, requires cooldown. Single enemy 65 damage, 22 stamina cost, 2 turn cooldown, poison and bleeding. And so this is a pretty powerful skill, a skill I would definitely recommend you run if you run your Fatid with the rainbow build. If you give this monster at least 1 strength rune and your monster is ranked up, there's a high possibility you can knock out an enemy monster using Rotten Claw. Because even if that initial damage doesn't kill the enemy monster, maybe the poison and the bleeding will. Next up is Headworms, deals moderate special damage to one enemy, applies possession to one enemy, requires cooldown. 40 damage, 23 stamina cost, 3 turn cooldown, but when you attack that enemy monster, you're also going to be possessing the enemy monster. And so obviously the fact that Headworms is a single possession, that's a really great skill, one I would definitely recommend you run. And now we can move on to skills group 3, Decomposing Body, applies double healing and regeneration to itself, gives 1 extra turn to itself, requires cooldown. This is a self skill that costs 15 stamina, has a 4 turn cooldown, you do double healing and regeneration to yourself. You know how insane that is? Because you get an extra turn. This means that regeneration takes effect immediately. Normally, my biggest gripe with regeneration is that it's a setup skill. You don't get an immediate heal, you have to wait till the next turn to get that regeneration. and because you have to wait for that next turn, what happens? Your monster could potentially die. That's why I personally always prioritize immediate heals over regeneration, but this monster takes it to a whole new level. He gives himself regeneration and an extra turn. But not only that, he even gives himself double healing, which means regeneration is actually a plus 40% for the next 3 turns. That's ridiculous, and that next turn is an immediate 40% heal. That's so insane. That is an amazing skill, must-have skill right there. Decomposing Body, it is so darn good. Also, because it's an extra turn skill, if you happen to get total blinded, hey, you're no longer blinded. Or if you happen to get possessed, well, you have a 20% chance that he might use this skill, which is to your benefit. Gosh, I really can't get over the skill. 40% healing for the next 3 turns. That's a combined total of 120% healing. That is so darn good. And then double healing, he can take advantage of relics, of healing relics that his teammates may have, or healing skills of other teammates. Just be sure, if you do anything, be sure to run Decomposing Body. And it's because of this skill that I also think he doesn't really need a life rune, because he's healing himself enough to max pretty much whenever he wants to, so he doesn't need a life rune. However, if you do have a life rune, well then you can capitalize, because that 40% heal, the more life he has, the more he's healing. So you really can't go wrong whether or not you do give him a life rune. Oh wow, let's continue. Infected Breath deals moderate nature damage to all enemies, applies poison and bleeding to all enemies, requires cooldown. This is an AoE skill that deals 40 damage, costs 27 stamina, has a 2-turn cooldown. You poison and bleed all of the enemy monsters. That's going to reduce their damage output. That's going to be reducing their HP for the following turns. Infected Breath is a really great skill, regardless of how you rune this monster. If you give him 3 team speed, how I'm going to be advocating for, well then it's great, because when you give a monster 3 team speed, you want him to do some sort of torture status effect or some sort of control effect. That monster's only purpose is to do something to the enemy team, and in this case, he's poisoning and bleeding. And so the damage output doesn't matter. However, if you do give this monster at least 1 strength rune, well then you have a 40 damage AoE that on top of that does torture status effects. Infected Breath, another skill I'm definitely going to recommend. And last but not least, we have Headworm. Applies possession to all enemies, requires cooldown. No damage, it costs 75 stamina though, and it has a 3-turn cooldown. So this skill has a high insane stamina cost, but in my personal opinion that doesn't really matter, considering we have relics. Like I said, he can even hold a stamina relic, so he can heal his own stamina if he needs to, but 75 isn't that significant when you look at his other skills, and he has 15 here, 27 here, 23, 16, 22. All of his other skills are low stamina, so it doesn't matter that his AoE possession is high stamina cost. And anyhow, it goes without saying, this is your other must-have skill. Headworm Infestation is amazing. We have a nature monster with AoE possession, who can also do poison and bleed to the enemy monsters, who can on top of that apply regeneration, double healing, and an extra turn to himself, who can on top of that do a single possess, or a massive nature attack to one enemy monster. And so now the question is, if you have this monster, what skills do you give him and what runes do you give him? Well, I'm going to go with my recommendation first. My recommendation is you give this monster 3 team speed, and you give him Headworms, Decomposing Body, Headworm Infestation, and Infected Breath. And the reason you want to do that is because by giving this monster 3 team speed, he's going to be going last. And when he goes last, you're going to be able to do whatever you think is more beneficial. You're going to be able to decide if you want to do a single possession to one enemy monster, or maybe you want to do an AoE possession, or maybe you just want to apply the DOT because that's enough to kill the enemy monsters. And of course you can do Decomposing Body as needed. Because you're going to be giving him 3 team speed, he doesn't really need Rotten Claws, you don't need that 65 damage. However, that's not to say you can't run it instead of Infected Breath. Because if you're going last with your monster, there might be a good possibility that you don't need Infected Breath, and instead you can deal some extra damage to that one enemy monster, and then the poison and bleeding can take care of them. Not to mention, if you get this monster rank 3 or rank 4, he's still going to be doing some hefty damage even without any strength runes. But as for my personal preference, it really is to run Infected Breath. But it's ultimately up to you. If you're giving this monster the rainbow build, a strength, a life, and then a team speed or a speed, then I would say definitely be sure to run Rotten Claw. You want to take advantage of the 65 damage skill. Be sure to run Headworm Infestation. I know it doesn't deal any damage, and I know it kind of feels like, why am I giving him a strength rune if I'm going to be running Headworm Infestation? That doesn't matter. You still want to have that control for whenever you may need it. If you run him a rainbow build, if you give him a strength, a life, and a speed or a team speed, well, I got news for you. He's still not going to be going first or second. He's still probably most likely going to be going last. So because he's going last, you're going to be able to attack strong with the Rotten Claw, and you're still going to have the chance to do Headworm Infestation if you need to. As for your third skill, be sure to run Infected Breath, because once again it's a 40 damage AoE and you want to take advantage of the strength rune. And then be sure to run Decomposing Body, even though once again it deals no damage. It's just an amazing self skill that grants you an extra turn, it gets you healing, you have the strength and the life rune to take advantage of, and when you get that extra turn you can attack with Infected Breath or Rotten Claw. So you get the best of both worlds, you get your healing and you get your strong damage output. And of course, as I already mentioned, if you happen to get this monster rank 3 or especially rank 4, there is the possibility you can run this monster with 3 speed runes, your best speed runes, to have this monster immediately go first and do an AoE possession. And let's be honest, the only reason you can pull that off is because he's going to be ranked up. And by being ranked up, he has a competitive advantage over non-ranked up monsters. Because if you were to compare rank 4 monsters with rank 4 monsters, well then once again Fatid will be incredibly slow. But because you have this monster ranked up, you have him at level 120, and your other nature monster level 105, maybe you have Silotus level 105. I'm sorry, it doesn't matter. Fatid with the same speed runes is going to be way faster. So that's the advantage of having a team race monster that's ranked up. And so those are the different possibilities for runes in my opinion. 3 speed runes, 3 team speed, or the rainbow build, a strength, a life, and a speed or a team speed. With again my personal preference being the 3 team speed, but that's also because when I do these analysis videos, I do compare the monsters on an equal playing field at level 100. But in terms of actual gameplay, I'm honestly going to be looking through my nature monsters, and I'm going to be seeing, do I have a monster better than Fatid if I happen to get him ranked up? If I get him ranked 3 or ranked 4, I might just have to slip on the 3 speed runes so I can finally have a good nature monster to use in Team Wars. And so with that said, that is going to conclude this analysis. Please let me know what you think about this monster in the comments below. If you happen to get this monster, let me know how are you going to rune him. Are you going to give him the rainbow build? Are you going to give him 3 speed runes? And I also want to know what skill set would you give this monster and what relics. I'm really curious also, what relics would you give this monster? Would you go for the pestilence trap? Would you go for the oblation trap? Would you go for the oblation staff or the revenge staff or maybe the energizer staff? Whatever you guys' thoughts are on this monster, let me know in the comments below. Really hope you guys enjoyed this video and I will see you all next time.